would help, would help. The City Council Committee, oh, am I not? Oh, thank you, Councilor Hepworth. City Council Committee on Public Health, Safety, and Environment, co-posted with the Committee of the Whole, met in City Council Chamber on June 2nd, 2025 at 6 o'clock for the purpose of discussing the matters listed below. Notice of this meeting was posted on May 22nd, 2025 at 5:02 p.m. This meeting is being recorded. We have two items on our agenda tonight. One is regarding tour buses, and then when we finish with that, we're going to finish up and discuss enforcement of sidewalk clearance in the winter. So, also in the room, we have Lieutenant Tucker from the Police Department. We have Christina Hodge from the Department of Transportation. We have Jeff Schwartz from the Transportation Commission. Yeah. And we're going to start with Christina Hodge. You ready to go?
Thank you. Yes, I'm Christina Hodge. I'm the Assistant Transportation Director here in Salem in the Department of Transportation. So before you tonight are some ordinance recommendations that were recommended by the Transportation Commission from our meeting, I believe, April 24th. Don't quote me on that one. And they're related to proposed changes to existing bus parking around Salem, whether that's amending a location that currently exists, or adding or modifying to create new parking within the city. As you know, we have lots of tour buses that come in and out, whether they come to stay for an hour or drop off at various locations. So this was done in an effort to create more spaces for those buses to safely either pull off to the side of the street or to idle while a tour group is at a nearby destination. So I can walk through some of the changes. There's many spaces that we are not touching around the city, but for discussion tonight in the ordinance are locations that we are either modifying or adding. So on Bridge Street, we are proposing a drop-off adjacent to the Old Salem Jail lot, beginning at a point 20 feet east of the entrance to the Old Salem Jail parking lot. And continuing in an easterly direction for 55 feet, and that will be a 10-minute limit drop-off only tow zone, and that's also October only from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then Canal Street, beginning at a point opposite the southerly corner of Hancock Street and continuing northward for 525 feet. That is also weekends, October weekends only, tow zone 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then closer to the downtown on New Derby Street, we are proposing 70 feet east of the intersection with Washington Street, and continuing in a westerly direction for 100 feet, another 10-minute limit drop-off only, and that will also be October only from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And right there is where there currently could be space for 5 metered spaces. I believe it's only 3 spaces currently striped. So that will only impact 3 existing metered spaces. The spacing there is a bit odd as it transitions with a taper. And then Washington Square West, beginning 165 feet north of the intersection with Essex Street, and for a distance of 70 feet in the southerly direction, we are proposing a 1-hour limit tour bus parking only during October. So this location is where there are currently 3 metered spaces, and this would extend one of the existing year-round 1-hour parking spots. So only for October, it would be continuing that segment. It is opposite of the Hawthorne Hotel there, just to orient folks. And then continuing in that same area, and the location that was probably most discussed both internally and with the Transportation Commission is on Washington Square South, on the southerly side, beginning 198 feet from the intersection of Washington Square West and extending 135 feet in an easterly direction. That would be a 2-hour limit tour bus parking only, and that would be year-round, I believe. And this is the location that, as it currently exists, is alongside the Common, and this proposal is to flip it on the opposite side of the street, and then alongside with that, during October only, we would keep that space where it currently exists to have a parking prohibited addition.
So it would be against the Hawthorne Hotel,
Yes, the parking lot, correct.
with there's no meters or anything?
Yeah, currently not metered. So that is essentially what is before you tonight. Happy to go back and answer any questions about all of them.
I forgot to mention that from the Committee of the Whole have Councilors Merkel, Hapworth, and Watson-Felt. Thank you. I also, so Council Watson-Felt, we just went over Section 3, which is the additions. We haven't done Section 1, which is the repealing. So how about if we cover the top two, and then we can open it up to the council? So Section 1 is where we're deleting stops. Although the middle paragraph,
Yes, so there was a modified version, and this was an error that Lieutenant Tucker caught and brought to my attention as well when he was going through the process of recommending the ordinance. So for the first paragraph that stands currently, it would repeal on Washington Square South. So this is the spot that we were just discussing, where it is currently alongside the Common, and that is proposed to be repealed because it would be replaced with the flipping of the opposite side of the street where the bus parking would is proposed to shift to.
so I'm going to repeat that just for Council Watson-Felt. So by taking that out, currently the bus parking is against the Common, and then at the end of Section 3 is where we're flipping it, so the bus parking will be against the hotel. The second paragraph is one that we want to delete out of this ordinance, right?
Yes, because it was an incorrect copy into a section where it should not be removed. So that will not need to be a part of this, so it should be struck.
So before we go on, anyone have any questions or issues of us striking? Striking that paragraph?
About clarification in general, could we go there, or do you want to?
Well, I wanted to just clean up by addressing the Washington Square West one. Okay, so I will enter.
Sorry. Mr. Chair.
Yeah?
Can you just go through the process of, I think that initially there was talk of removing some tour bus parking downtown. Is this what happened with this mistake, or what was the process behind this? Is this just a typo?
I think there were previous conversations about potentially creating additional drop-off locations rather than the 1-hour parking. So this was a carryover from a previous draft iteration where it would have removed it from the 1-hour limit and created a drop-off only. So that was where the carryover accidentally remained.
Thank you.
Okay, so before we talk about the actual repeals and additions, I will entertain a motion to delete the paragraph that starts with Washington Square West. Councilor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a motion to remove the second paragraph in Section 1 in regards to Washington Square West.
Excellent. Seconded by Councilor Gerslow. Any discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, all in favor? Okay. Matter carries. Now, was there anything else that you or Lieutenant want to discuss before we open it up for questions?
I think we are all set on our side.
Jimi Hendrix feedback, all right. Hello?
Yes.
All right, everyone hear me? Okay. I'm going to start. I just want to address Canal Street, because that's in Ward 5. And I was talking to Chief Miller today about the intent of pushing some of the tour bus parking away from the downtown. So we've always had a couple of 100 feet, which is, I don't know, 2 buses. I don't know how many, 3 buses maybe? I don't know. But now we're making it 500 feet, okay? So I'm assuming that we're almost encouraging tour buses to park on Canal Street and then people walk downtown.
Testing.
Okay, thanks for hanging in there, everyone. We're going to have some waves for the foreseeable future.
You do.
Do any counselors have any questions for Christina or David? Councilor Hepworth.
It's a very close header. Thank you, and thank you for this information, Christina and David and Lieutenant Tucker. Can you clarify, I guess before we get started, can you clarify on the Bridge Street bus stop there? I can't picture where, I'm looking on my phone at the map, and I looked at it earlier and previously. I just cannot understand where exactly that is or what that would be.
Yes, so that location is I guess, so if you were coming down the AUB bypass road and taking the left, it is quite wide there until it narrows down beyond almost at Howard Street. So it would be narrowing that travel lane. There is additional width in that spot of the cross section of the street. So it would be alongside the entry point to the Salem jail lot. Yeah, the old Salem jail parking lot. It's a small surface parking lot right there. I don't.
Okay, so just as Bridge Street becomes Bridge Street instead of Bridge Street.
Yes, Bridge Street turns into Bridge.
Yeah, that right there, we're just narrowing the travel lane.
Yes, it would be striped.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. Just was trying to picture that. And that makes sense. Can you talk?
Will, if you don't mind, that will obscure my wife's pocket park. She takes.
Will obscure the counselor's wife's pocket park, just so you know. Can you talk through the process a little bit about? Because you mentioned the temporary spots or the proposal for temporary spots, and then the move to 1 hour and I think 2 hour spots. Can you talk about that? Just about that thought process there.
Are you referring to the spaces on Washington Square West?
Right.
Yep. The Transportation Commission had this, discussed this at length. We had some input from some business owners in the area, Chamber of Commerce input, things like that. Yeah. And so it was decided, because those were portrayed as vital by some of the businesses down there, and a lot of their concerns were year-round also, have more opportunity for parking, get the bus off the road, a little more space, kind of akin to a delivery zone. Have a lot of issues with those also. So that was determined to maintain that and expand it somewhat as a 1 hour zone. Apparently that a lot of buses that would suit their needs to just be there for the hour. Are there any others, or is it?
That was the biggest concern there. So I guess if I go back to last Halloween, last October, in the conversations I think a lot of us had with the chief and probably with yourself also, Lieutenant Tucker, and with others, with neighbors, the concern around tour buses wasn't a commercial concern, it was a safety concern. So I think that's where we looked at, we understand that tour buses are something that our businesses rely upon, and it's something that has, it is a big part of Halloween. It's something that we live with, but that they're getting bigger and there's more of them coming in, and it's becoming dangerous for the pedestrians and for the people living around Salem, and for drivers, and for anyone who's trying to get around Salem. These tour buses have become a little bit of a concern. So I'm trying to understand why the feedback of a local business was prioritized in this case. Is it a safety concern, or is it a commercial concern?
Well, I think if everyone behaves properly and drives where they're supposed to, when they're supposed to, a bus could come down 1A and park there safely. Not all these drivers aren't the same. There's some good drivers and some bad drivers, but I'd say the majority of them are pretty safe drivers. They have to maintain their credentials and so on. So I don't think a bus coming in most of the time is going to be a grave concern for pedestrians if they come in, drive properly, stay on the streets they're supposed to stay on. And part of the issue too was it's hard to drill this down to just, it's really Saturdays and Sundays, maybe Friday afternoon, you see the massive amount of pedestrians activity there. But, Monday through Thursday, even, pedestrian activity might be heavy, but not to the level you see on the weekend. But it's a little tough to restrict this, by day. Say, the buses can come in on certain days and not certain days. Really just standardization. I would like to see more drop-off activity, and then a lot of it is buses who haven't done their homework, who come in blindly, and then wind up on roads they shouldn't go on, or doing maneuvers. Things we're trying to avoid is having a bus back up, things like that. So with drop zones, and then the creation of more parking, or easy to access parking further from the downtown, the hope is that they could drop their passengers who are going to be there for a substantial amount of time, and then go park on Ford Avenue, Canal Street, Jefferson, and as you get them out of the downtown as quick as possible. Part of the discussion was, how far away can you drop them? They might not, a lot of the tours. It's a juggling act of compliance. So if you make the drop-off zone too far away, they just probably won't use it. They'll just drop somewhere, anywhere. And usually the thinking is they can get it done before anything happens, before the police get there or anything. So be mindful of that, like making it safe enough, convenient enough, and that they'll actually use it.
Yeah. I think that gets at the question of the good actors versus the bad actors, and I think that the majority of the buses that are coming in are doing their homework. They know where they're going, and they know where they're dropping, and they've done this before. Specifically in October, and probably in September also, a lot more buses are coming in that don't have any regard for our streets. Frequently don't have any regard for signs on our streets, blocked streets, barricades. They're going around them. And I think that's what we have in front of us here is fine. It seems like an adjustment to the ordinance that could potentially be good for buses to drop and get out to where they need to go if they know what they're doing. It doesn't address the bigger problem, which is the safety concern caused by bad actors. And I think there's a registration process potentially, so we know what buses are in the city and where they're supposed to go, and we know that they have an understanding of where the parking is. I think that I haven't seen that come before us yet, and I don't think that's part of this plan. This was, like I said, this was a part of the correction of errors from last year. And is this it on the tour bus parking right now before Halloween?
At the moment for parking, that's all we have to offer. But to answer your earlier comment, or respond to your earlier comment, the flip side is when we close a road, we can enforce that. So it really comes down to enforcement, which this isn't really anything about enforcement other than the parking regulations. As far as enforcement of, the type of driving they're doing, or the type of vehicle and where it is, that's in a different realm of either motor vehicle laws or different city ordinances. So if we close a street and they violate that, we could give them a ticket for ignoring that sign. They drive down the road that's designated no heavy vehicles, we could cite them for that. Parking in non-approved areas would be a city ordinance violation of the large commercial vehicle parking in a residential area. If it's not authorized, we can cite them for that, idling, things like that. But this is more, this set of ordinances is more about where can they legally park, where can they legally drop off. The job won't be done with this, because now this information has to be pushed out to the different tour companies, try to get this in front of them. Not everyone will see it, and that's people will have to deal with.
Last question. you could argue that the Washington Square West parking, I think, is as central to Salem as it gets. I don't think there's anything more central to downtown Salem that I can think of. That is sort of the beating heart of Halloween in Salem, is like right at that kind of spot right there. And in your view, removing commercial concerns and just understanding that tour buses are an operational thing that we have to figure out how to get through the city as safely as possible, would it have been a better idea to make those temporary spots all along in front of the Safford House, or to have it as 1 hour parking, which I feel like is difficult to enforce at times?
Well, I could say I feel comfortable with the level of safety for having vehicles parked there if they comply with the zone and the time limit. The 1 hour it's not the hardest thing to enforce. When you get into the 2 and 4 hour zones, those are really cumbersome. But the 1 hour zone, provided, we have the capacity to be there if we can get to it, things like that. The other thing is these spaces, if you will, face the right way. So when we clear that out for closing the roads, we're really closing the roads and removing all vehicles. Those vehicles are facing the right way. We can get them out of there. And that goes to the flip on Washington Square South, which was to try to maintain some bus parking availability, but to have them facing the right way so that not backing them out or anything like that. The main thing is any bus that was heading to Washington Square West, we would want them to come down Winter Street, Washington Square North, and make their way that way. But as far as safety goes, I don't have any grave concerns about it, about the parking there. When they pull in and park, it's it's done. As far as I've seen, it's done in a safe manner. They're on the departure side of the crosswalk at Brown Street, so they're not a visual obstruction for approaching vehicles. There might be a visual obstruction just in general, but as far as someone trying to cross the street, where they are there, I don't see any, I don't really have any safety concerns about people peering, in front of the bus. Had it been the other way, we wouldn't have put it there. But.
Okay, yeah, agreed. I think like on this ordinance as a whole, I think thought was put into it in that we're trying to get buses pointed in the right direction, literally. We're trying to ensure that buses have places to drop that are temporary and we get them out to the places they need to go. I would prefer to see the Washington Square West drop zone be temporary to keep people moving. I think even right now, like even in May, you're seeing buses dropping off, parking illegally all around the common because they can't find a spot along that space there. I think making that very clearly temporary, probably even year round or through in a much larger time period would probably make sense because it could get buses trained to go where they need to go. But appreciate the thought that was put into the rest of this here. And I think that if I was on the committee, I would recommend that change. Thank you.
Before we move on, 2 things. One, I'm hoping that the people from the Transportation Commission will, in subsequent meetings, talk as much about safety, since it's clear that this ordinance is really just about parking regulations. And before I move on to Councilor Gerslow, I just have a question for Councilor Hapworth. Are you suggesting that the Washington Square West, we change from 1 hour limit to 10-minute?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I guess I would, if I were making a recommendation on that, it would be to change Washington Square West to a temporary drop zone, which I think is the same drop zone that we have for Bridge Street. Drop zone, tow zone, drop off only, tow zone. That's what I would recommend. But I think I'd want to run it through Christina and Lieutenant Tucker if the committee wanted to do that before we brought it back before the council. Yeah, we could change it today. I just want to make sure the wording looks right.
Well, we could change it to the same as Bridge Street. 10-minute limit, drop off only.
If that were the will of the committee.
So I can't make a motion either. Is this something that, Councilor Jerslow?
Thank you. Just two things. Will all the signs say no idling? Because I know on Derby Street, I get a lot of complaints when the buses park across from the Brook House. The buses are parking. I don't think the signs say no idling. Some of them still idle. I know further down for the service zones, you have no idling signs, and those work good, but buses still continue to idle, and they complain about the fumes. So I would hope that, like along the Hawthorne Hotel on Washington Square, west or south, along the hotel, that you would have no idling. And then I would make a motion to change the Washington Square West bus stop to a 10-minute drop-off only.
Councilor Jerslow moves that under the Washington Square West section, we change the 1 hour limit to 10-minute limit, drop-off only. Is it?
Second it.
Seconded by Councilor Harvey. Up for discussion. Councilor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to just go further than even this parking. Is there a reason why we can't see tour buses have drop-offs, like as if people were coming from the T station, from the outskirts? Why do we have to allow the buses directly into the downtown area in general? I mean, we have how many visitors take the T and they go from the T station and they walk into the downtown, or even over on Canal Street, just the outskirts of the area, that's where the tour buses drop off and park, on the outskirts of the city, especially during October. There's just so many pedestrians within a downtown area at that time. I mean, it's a tour bus. It's not an Uber. It's not something that you take it to a direct spot. And I mean, I don't foresee that it would affect the amount of people that actually use the tour bus. It's just a question I'm tossing out there, because I would prefer to see a couple drop-off spots maybe, but the rest of it just be completely outside the realm of the exact downtown area, for none other than safety, number one, but two, even the traffic issues. You get a couple of those buses trying to go around that rotary on Summer Street. Half of them can't even make the whole rotary. They end up cutting across the, you know what I mean? It's just, to me, it just doesn't make sense as to why tour buses have to get right into the downtown area.
You want any comment on that? I would agree generally. Sometimes as school groups, children, or elderly people, or people with mobility issues, so you never know who's on the bus. So I would agree with you, generally speaking. I think part of their service is, if you pay for this tour bus, we'll get you close to your attractions. And I certainly wouldn't design the city this way if we'd known how much tourism we would have. In terms of the rotary, just briefly, that it's tight. It was designed to be driven over just larger trucks. That's why it's relatively flat. Yeah, no, I get it. But that area is not the least of our concern. There's a lot of other tougher areas. But no, generally speaking, I would love to see drop off on the outskirts. Love to see people driving their cars and finding a place to park on the outskirts, and just stay out of the downtown and make our lives easier. But we have to balance, the needs.
Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, Chair Cohen, not being a member of the committee. And I appreciate that. It's hard to get in the downtown, and it would be helpful if they weren't trying to get all the way in. I was just wondering if the ward councilor or the officer might have an opinion in that I do see a lot of the buses, because they want to drop in downtown, just pulling over and dropping, right on my street, especially in, around the jail area, around Dalton, just different areas, they just drop. do either of you think it will help to have some designated spots? Then that might be better than that they advertise the tourists that they're going to get them into the downtown and then they're just dropping? Or are those the bus drivers that are rogue and they're just going to do it anyway? I just would be interested in any perspective on that, because I see your point, Councilor Harvey.
So all the tour buses have designated spots, right?
For drop-off? Right, so, this is we're just trying to make the best plans we can. The most amount of drop-off spots so we can reasonably fit without taking away all of the parking or, and then, there will be some rogue drivers. There'll be some times when you have space for 3 buses to drop and 5 show up and they do something creative. I was trying to be
I'll recognize you in
whatever we do, whether it's tour bus parking or speed limits or stop signs, it's only as good as the compliance that you get from the people targeted by it. So there'll always be, hopefully not always be, but we always plan on there being a bus that will do something that we didn't want them to do. And we have to take action at that point.
Councilor Watson.
Thank you, Councilor Cohen. I'm sorry for speaking out of turn. It's important to clarify that what these drivers do, these bad actors, as Councilor Hapworth had described them, and he's quite right, is dangerous. And that is the biggest problem that we see, is that these bad actors consistently do exactly what Lieutenant Tucker described, which is take a risk, drop humans in the middle of the street, block roadways, and get out of there far before enforcement ever gets around to getting there. I see it all the time. This year, I've seen it almost year round. We've recently seen a number of emails come through, especially around the common area. And I think that I support Councilor Hapworth's point that if we have 10-minute drop zones, theoretically, that could keep things moving, at least more quickly. I think what we see, especially at Washington Square West, and what I think we will also see on Washington Square South, is the pressure to drop versus the pressure to park, or the duration allowed for parking in those areas. And I would recommend, if it were the will of the body, to also change Washington Square South to a 10-minute drop zone as well. I would support that when this came back to the council for the exact same reason. I do have a couple of questions that I want to follow up some of this commentary with, and hopefully get some more clarification. And then I have some additional thoughts and comments. So back to Bridge Street, Christina, when we're talking about coming alongside the old Salem jail lot, is this described as the pullover spot being before, if I'm taking a right from Bridge onto Bridge, right at the lot itself? Is that before or after the entrance to the Salem parking lot, the old Salem jail parking lot? Is it like close? Is it after the entrance before Howard, or is it before the entrance of the parking lot, just as you're taking that right-hand turn onto Bridge?
So the language says on the southerly side, beginning at a point 20 feet east of the entrance to the old Salem jail lot. So it is the parcel between the entrance and Howard Street.
Okay, that's better than the other way around, in my opinion.
Right. That would be too close to the intersection.
That is an extremely, I have some concerns. I think it works, right? But here are my concerns about that. People come up that, we've talked about this before, they come up that section of Bridge and they're going up a hill and they speed up, which is why we see the issues at the intersection of Winter that we see. So as long as this, obviously the striping is clear, the narrowing may actually be helpful to that. I do have some concerns about the visibility of people then crossing across Howard, people coming down Howard and attempting to take a left onto Bridge, which I myself do as much as the Hapworths do probably. And so just understanding from Sightlines perspective what the distance from the corner of Howard is looking like and how far away from that crosswalk there.
We have not looked at sightlines.
That's a problem. Yeah, in my opinion, I think sightlines are an incredibly important part of the research done when identifying potential locations where there will be pedestrians moving around that area. As you know, there's a lot of pedestrian activity because of the cemetery as well. There's a lot of Airbnbs in that section of Bridge, and people are regularly crossing across Bridge Street right there and going up and down Howard, especially now that it's a very successful shared road experience on Howard, which I think is working really, really well. But sightlines continually are an issue there when taking a left from Howard onto Bridge.
So if there is a tour bus alongside the sidewalk, I mean, ideally there would be a vehicle pushed further away from the sidewalk there. You should be able to, there's no like vertical obstruction aside from a vehicle that is a tour bus dropping off passengers. And if it is a drop zone, they shouldn't be parked there really. It should just be drop and continue on. So I don't think that there's much, it's just like any other spot that is on this map. I mean, you would have to look for an oncoming vehicle if you are trying to maneuver out of Howard Street. I don't think there's any like guidelines for engineering practices for an idling vehicle sightline distance, because most of the time that's going to be open and free as long as there's not a parked vehicle dropping off passengers. That crosswalk, I know we've talked about that crosswalk across the bridge before. It's actually not included in the Bridge Street plans that MassDOT came through. I know that's like a different conversation than tonight. So at some point in time it was constructed, so it was not part of the MassDOT plan. I don't know the history on that location. I think it's quite dangerous. It's where the road really opens up and speeds do pick up as it comes off that hill. But we can certainly evaluate as much as we can in the situation that we're proposing.
Yeah, so to Councilor Cohen's point before around the discussion with Transportation Commission and these locations, you know, the way vehicles move around larger vehicle and the way we have to inch out now right into oncoming traffic to potentially see beyond an actively idling tour bus at the corner of Howard is potentially dangerous. So I'll support it if it's the will of the body. I do think getting a 10-minute drop zone in October outside, and I honestly don't know why it's just October. I would support it August through November, whatever we need to do, because it was not October when folks are getting dropped off on the backyard of Dalton Parkway. Not Dalton Parkway, the building there, the public housing on St. Peter's. So we've had lots of issues in that area. I think it makes a lot of sense, but it just has to be done, I think, obviously really safely. Okay, so Washington Square, with the flip on Washington Square south of the locations, is it the exact same number of parking spaces on the other side that will now be running along the common?
I believe it was a 1-for-1, same exact length.
Okay, and
It's actually, if you don't mind,
Please.
Councilor Watson-Felt, it looks like it's a 120 to 135, 15-foot difference. The new zone next to the Hawthorne is 135 feet.
Yep.
Whereas the one that is the weird, crappy one on the common, because that's right where the walkway is at 120 feet.
so with that loss of 10 feet, is it truly the same number of cars that are possible to park alongside the common there? And will there be any, so currently there's also, I think, not technically a restriction, but you don't often see people parking alongside the very end of the Hawthorne parking lot. So will there be any restriction to the parking on the other side because of the width of the street, or is it all 1-for-1 for 1-for-1?
In that area, we did adjust the distance of that parking slightly, partly reflects what's needed for a tour bus. And then some members of the Transportation Commission, and I agree with this, pointed out that the width of the road when the tour bus is there, when they're on the common side even, it's very narrow. So the idea was to flip it over and then restrict parking just for October when the traffic's at its heaviest. restrict parking on the common side across from the buses to allow for traffic movement. That answer.
I think it does. Similarly, we talked a little bit before, but I don't know that I ever got a solid answer on what the plan is going to be for then moving those buses that are now pointing in the direction of the residential side streets off of the common, and how you plan on directing the movement of those buses once they leave that location, because they will have to either manage the right-hand turn towards Essex, which I don't think they can do, or they will have to be driven to the left and then either back over to Washington or straight down Pleasant, which is a totally different issue when you get down to Bridge. So what is your plan on directing buses to get out of there once they're facing that direction?
We did discuss, it's not part of this package because it's not the right ordinance for it. We did discuss whether, some signage ideas to direct them away. They can make that right turn. We don't want to see that. They can do it, but we don't want that. Very tight when you get to Essex.
Especially if people are parked too close to the corner, which often happens in that very densely residential area, especially when they then have to then take a right-hand turn back onto Essex, which is insane.
So the idea would be to encourage them through signage, make a left on Washington Square East, and then left again to Washington Square North, get to Winter or back down Hawthorne Boulevard, depending on where their destination is. I think if they're parked here, I would just venture to guess that they would, when they leave, they're leaving town, so they wouldn't want to go down Essex to go park somewhere else and drop them off again. Once they're here and they've picked their passengers back up, I believe that would be their trip out of town. So I think left to Washington Square East would be a natural move for them.
Well, if it is the will of the body to change that to a 10-minute dropping zone, we now have buses circling the common on a more regular basis, and we will need to make sure that they are going somewhere specific and that they are given clear direction as to how to get there.
Right. This if you do a 10-minute drop zone here, the only issue I could see with that is where will they go park and how will they get there? So if they see Ford Ave as an option, do they try to go down Essex Street? They'll need to know to go back to Bridge Street. That's why a lot of the drop-off zones were planned to their escape route to get to Ford Ave, Canal, Jefferson. So
I think that if we were to change that section to a 10-minute drop and change the Washington Square West to a drop, a 10-minute drop, then that solves, hopefully, relieves some of the pressure for the people who parked recently, just this last couple of weeks ago, completely blocked the slip lane onto Brown from Washington Square between the museum and the Conan statue, who have pulled over and blocked Oliver to drop people in the middle of traffic, et cetera. So I think we need to keep buses moving around the common. I don't want them parked there. So hopefully the body will support that. I have more questions.
Yeah, but I wanted to address this if we could.
Sure.
Is that all right?
Yeah, however you'd like.
Yeah, because then we're getting too far away from the amendment. So in listening to you, Council Watson-Felt, go through your mental gyration there, it seems like there's like the pro and con is more buses versus, maybe more safety. So I'm going to pose a question to Lieutenant Tucker. It seemed like when we talked about enforcement in the beginning of the conversation, you said that it was easier for your department to enforce when it's a shorter limit. Like 2 to 4 hours is very difficult. 1 hour is somewhat difficult, but if we converted both of those Washington Square stops to 10-minute, would that make it easier to enforce? Because they're really close to each other and be like...
That's a tough call. I mean, we're not the only, police aren't the only enforcing body. I will say enforcement is very tough in October, just to try to get to the problem. The other thing is with time limits, if someone calls in and says a bus has been there for, if it's, say it's an hour, if the bus has been there for an hour, we have to observe it, verify that with a come back in an hour. That's why we really dislike the 4 hour, because now you're made a 4 hour commitment to get back there and see if the vehicle's still there. And it's not just buses. And certain court decisions have made it really hard to do that effectively.
But you could be changing a behavior a little bit by having signs that say 10 minutes.
Yeah. Right. What we really want to achieve is a system that makes it easy to comply with, makes people willing to comply with it, and hopefully will reduce the need for enforcement.
Councilor Watson, if you don't mind, I think if we just I'll come back to you because I know you have more stuff, but if we just continue the discussion on this amendment, is that all right? Councilor Watson. Hi, Councilor Joseph.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question. The 1 hour limit, do you find that most buses just come for an hour? Like if they're dropping off to go on a tour of the Witch Museum or the or just walking around the city, I can't see a bus staying for just 1 hour and telling the people you got to be back in an hour. So did anybody do any, talk to any tour buses, companies that say, how long do they normally come in and walk around, or tell people we'll be here for an hour, pick you up? So if they're only there for an hour, I don't think people are going to run through Salem within an hour and come back to the bus and they'll be gone. So I would either say the drop off would be better, the 10-minute drop off and go find a place to park, or do the 4 hours. That's a normal tour. You go in on any, and plenty bus tours across Europe, and it's not an hour. It's usually more than an hour. So I just want to know where you came up with the, someone from the commission, how did you come up with that hour? Thank you.
And before Jeff speaks quickly, we were told, Jeff will have more information than I will. We were told more anecdotally, we didn't do any study, but the 1 hour would serve certain groups, school groups, things like that. And then the 1 hour doesn't mean you have to stay for the hour either. That could be the drop zone. So if you have a longer tour plan and that space is open, you could pull in, drop, and take off.
Hi, thanks. Jeff Swartz, Vice Chair of the Transportation Commission, and also Executive Director of the Salem Chamber. So we did speak with a number of the businesses that rely on those spaces. It's not just the Salem Witch Museum, local walking tour companies, the Salem Witch Museum, other attractions, the Hawthorne Hotel themselves for banquets. School groups are usually in and out in an hour, especially for food. The walking tours can also do it in an hour, and the Witch Museum prides itself on doing it in an hour in October. And cruise ship companies also come through looking for those, very quick turnaround things onto the next stop from the shore excursions. So there are quite a few uses that actually can do it within an hour. Obviously, there will be certain instances where they take a little bit longer than that, but by and large, especially the Witch Museum, they really pride themselves on being able to move the groups through in that hour time frame.
Councilor Hepworth.
Thank you. Sticking on this amendment here, I think that, first of all, I think that I know we've already taken a vote on section 1 there, but if it were my choice, I would say that this should say, on Washington Square West, it should say to the intersections of Brown Street. So going from Essex Street to the intersection of Brown Street. So we're adding additional spaces for the tour buses, but it's all 1 hour from one end to the other. And then we're repealing the second paragraph of section 1 as it initially had been. That would be my friendly amendment or my choice on that. And I think, yep, sorry.
So instead of intersection of Essex Street, it would be?
So it would say 65 feet north of the intersection of Essex Street, and then it would be crossed through. It would say to the intersection of Brown Street, and then it would be the 10-minute language that we added earlier. And I do like,
Could I chime in on that? If you do expand anything, we just like to phrase it so that it's 20 feet off the corners. 20 feet, or even you can make it a little greater if you want, if it's going to be an amendment.
20 feet to the, so is that what it is now, 20 feet?
20 feet's the standard. That's not even, doesn't even have to be in an ordinance specifically. And then anything greater than that would have to be spelled out. But when doing something like this, we don't.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It does say 20. Okay. Yeah. The language above, so it says where it says 20 feet from the intersection of Brown Street. So in this case, I think I don't know whose point it was, but maybe it was Councilor Watson felt having everything in that corner around the common be temporary drop zone, I think would allow for more velocity of drop-offs. I think it would allow residents to know that these buses this is temporary, nobody's parked here permanently. And then just to also point out, completely appreciate that the Witch Museum can get people in and out in an hour, and that there's a desire for those, but it's not working right now. And it's only, as of recently, it was only May, and there's already full parking and buses looking for places to drop people. So I think having that temporary, specifically in October, all around the common would make the most sense potentially. And I do want to have more of a conversation around Bridge Street later as we move through these amendments.
I'm just going to repeat that. Washington Square West, bus stops westerly side beginning 165 feet north of the intersection of Essex Street to 20 feet from the intersection of Brown Street.
Correct. Yeah. This was Councilor Jerslow's amendment, so if she wanted to.
Councilor Jerslow, would you accept that as a friendly amendment
Yes,
to your amendment?
after Essex Street and 20 feet from the intersection of Brown Street.
Now let's finish up on Washington Square South. So the suggestion that Council Watson Felt has is that we also change that to 10-minute. If we do that, that leaves one stop at Washington Square West for an hour. Councilor Hepburn.
I think in this case, it would leave no stops if we've made this amendment here on Washington Square West, right? So the intention of this, I'm sorry. Yeah, there would be 10 minutes all the way down Washington Square West. And then I think Councilor Watson Felt's intention was that Washington Square South would also be 10 minutes. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So the way the proposed amendment was written, it was a little confusing, admittedly. 165 feet north of Essex, but then running south 70 feet. It's kind of written in reverse. So, but I think, unless I heard incorrectly, it sounded like you went 165 and then went north to Brown Street, which would really be a reduction. So maybe strike it and 20 to 20.
Yeah, so I think in this case, we want to take, I'm not sure what the language would be in this case, to go from Brown Street to whatever intended location on.
Your intention was the whole thing, right? The
whole thing, yeah.
So if you did that, I'd do 20 feet south of Brown Street. We could measure it out, but to 20 feet north of Essex.
Yep.
And one additional question of clarification, if I may. Would this be a temporary restriction just for October, or would this be year-round?
I guess the way I'm looking at this, this is just October right now, what we're looking at. So unless somebody wants to change that, there's an argument to be made that it could be year-round, but I think we're just looking at October at the moment.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess just to clarify on that, I think there maybe needs to be a larger conversation around that. I don't know that we I think maybe there needs to be some discussion as to what that should look like long term. But to me, I think that it's very clear that October it should be temporary, and there should be a lot of high velocity of people dropping and moving along. But maybe a larger conversation later with some more study.
If I may weigh in on that, the issue at hand really is around safety, and we had extensive conversations around making all of these spaces as safe as they possibly could be. It's really the coming and going of the buses that's inherently unsafe. I don't think a parked bus is inherently unsafe unless it's blocking a sight line, and considering the lack of turns in the neighborhood there, Brown Street kind of being behind the buses and the crosswalk in front of it, I would just be very cautious about making a change that's going to have a lot of ripple down effects on other businesses and others in the neighborhood. And ultimately, as Lieutenant Tucker has said, compliance, it's really striking the fine balance between something that they can comply with and they understand and is intuitive, while also, having them do things that are not, having them avoid things that are unsafe. Obviously, backing up on Washington Square South, instances like that are unacceptable. And I think we need to design all of these bus spaces and really the circulation patterns too around Washington Square, areas like that, so that they are going in intelligent ways that are safe and aren't creating problems for residents or for others. But by doing a strictly drop-off, even especially outside of October, but particularly even in October, there's actually going to be there'll be greater traffic of buses. There'll be more. The spaces will be open more. There'll be more buses coming and going, and that's something I just felt needs to be, that's a relevant part of the equation. And given the, I would say, excellent job of the Wick Museum and Walking Tours and the Hawthorne of getting their groups through, I would just be wary of putting additional burden on these spaces. And again, the compliance issue, if somebody was to stay there longer, 10 minutes is a relatively easy period of time to enforce, but I think that we're going to just have a lot more circulation of buses through here, and with increased circulation, I think it brings a chance for increased problems.
Before I go to Councilor Harvey and Councilor Watson-Felt, if people were complying, we wouldn't be talking about safety. Second of all, we don't really know if there'll be more buses. Okay, that's an assumption that you have capacity of if you have an electric car charger that if it's empty, someone's going to automatically fill it. So I'm more like, so I'm not really like, because no one's provided any study that an empty spot creates, someone filling the spot immediately. Like we don't have like they do with EV charging where you have apps that tell you that the space is open. So the bus has to be there and see the empty spot to be able to park there, right? So I'm not sure about that. I mean, I have two stops here, Canal Street, which we're more than doubling the size of Canal Street, which should take a lot of pressure off of the downtown. It's not that far of a walk. And I have the drop off at New Derby Street, which is, from my perspective is fine, but I do, somewhat defer to the, to the people who live and do business and obviously the counselor, but, we have 3 counselors that live within you could throw a rock from 2 of them to this one area near the hotel. So I think it's important that we talk about this. And then we will open it up to public comment. I do want people to know that. We also have Jeremy Fisk in the audience. So let him talk at some point, but Councilor Harvey and then Councilor Watson-Felt.
Thank you, Chair. You pretty much just asked the same question I had. We have no idea of how many buses are coming into the city on any given time. So the traffic issue, unless these buses are talking to each other, how are they going to know that those couple spots on Washington Street, or Washington Square, I should say, aren't available or are not available? So by making them just drop-offs, it's going to, you're going to get the same flow of traffic, in my opinion, because the buses don't know what buses are there or not. It's not like the parking garage that has a sign that says we're full. Until we can come up with a way of knowing how many tour buses are coming in and where they are parking, I'm a believer that, like I said earlier, I just think that we should just make all the drop-offs on the outskirts of the city or the outskirts of the downtown. end of story. We won't have any of these issues, period. They all go in a couple different spots, and all the tour buses know it's easy in, easy out on Bridge Street, same thing down on Canal Street. And there's nothing, I mean, because our streets are small enough as it is, you get a tour bus trying to go down a small street because they don't know where. I mean, who's to say that all these tour bus drivers are the same every year? Obviously, we know they're not. So it's kind of like, yeah, we have the ones that do it every year, and they know the system, they know where they're going. But getting back to what Councilor Cohen was saying is, those spots are there, so they're all right, they do it a couple times. All right, I know where I'm going to go. That's where that spot is. Well, guess what? The spot's taken. So now they're leaving there anyways because they got to find someplace else to go. So if it was just a drop zone, you're going to free up that drop zone every 10 minutes. So the traffic coming through there is going to be the same amount of traffic. It's going to be flowing instead of flowing with nothing to do. So now they're looking in exactly, getting back to what Councilor Watson-Felt was saying, is now the driver's going to get irritated because he couldn't get into the drop zone or he couldn't get into that 1 hour parking. So now they're just going to drop them anywhere they can. And all right, we're going to drop you here, be back here in an hour. And hopefully they can pick them up in that same spot in an hour. If not, they're trying to find out where their party is. So I just think tour buses in the downtown area altogether is just a nightmare. That's my opinion. Thank you.
I agree. I do agree. I understand the need to get folks who have mobility challenges and you don't know who's on the bus. I think that's a really fair point, Lieutenant Tucker. But I think in an ideal tourist world, we ban coach buses and large tour buses from our 400-year-old, tiny streets in the downtown, and we can sort of shuttle them around. We can get people where they need to go. I wish we had a better, more creative, more innovative, strategic plan for how we handle the flow of both traffic and bodies. I have to respectfully disagree with you, Jeff, on the point about it being less safe, because my perspective on it is, and what I have seen with my own eyes and what I have experienced on a regular basis is, because those spots are full and they are 1 hour or longer, people just stop a bus in the middle of traffic, open doors, and people get off. They have blocked side streets, they have blocked crosswalks, they have pulled onto Brown Street, they have dropped off on the corner of St. Peter's, they have blocked, which completely blocks sightlines for anyone driving around. I think if they were to know with signage and communication that these are drop zones and that they move, they perhaps would not open their doors, right? They would say, give me 5 minutes, that these people are letting somebody off, the space is about to open up. So I have to disagree, because I think the bigger safety issue is the consistent bad acting that we see year round because those spots are full. And frankly, I don't think downtown, our historic space, tourism or not, right, should be storage for private bus companies. I don't think it's a good use of our space. I don't think it's a good use or experience for business owners or residents or tourists. Frankly, I think we need to have designated drop zones. We need to keep the buses moving. They need to park somewhere else. They need to come back and get their folks wherever their immediate pick spot is, and then they need to also have, and I've been advocating for this for quite some time as well, dedicated bus routes through the city, right? You made a comment before, Lieutenant Tucker, about where they're, going where they're not supposed to be. Well, how do they know where they're not supposed to be? If it's simply a sign that says no heavy vehicles or no truck access, I mean, fine, but they ignore those anyways. So I consistently, time and again, have said and advocated for, and still don't understand why we don't have, so please someone tell me why it won't work, a dedicated series of bus routes for coach buses throughout the city that take them to drop zones and that keep them off very specific streets. Do not enter bus streets, right? Cambridge Street, Brown Street, Howard Street, all of our very small, very difficult angles, right? How many times have we seen buses just get stuck trying to take a turn they thought they could make? And I think that more temporary drop zones and larger outside the donut, right? We're going to talk about the donut. Let's bring the donut back around again. Outside the donut for longer term parking is the only way that makes any kind of sense in my mind when it comes to buses coming in with people, dropping them off, and having to go somewhere to store themselves. I don't understand also, has there ever been any thought to leveraging, and maybe if there is already parking there, my mistake, and I'm sorry for it, on Franklin or anywhere, just outside before even the overpass? It's very walkable for the most part from that space. I know that we've just repealed, I believe, the resident only in October on Franklin. We're extending the private commercial parking to Franklin. Franklin has a long stretch along the park there. I don't know, has that ever been, we could open up that as well for more storage, because I think storage is a problem. Like, I definitely get it. But I think theoretically, let's keep it moving in the downtown, store them somewhere else. And I think that would keep and designate the routes. And I think that would help with safety far beyond longer term storage that has to be tracked.
I would agree with you completely on the route system. That's something we could do. That's an advisory thing. The problem we'll get into with all of this is trying to restrict just buses is not something the city can just take up. That has to be, everything like that has to be approved by Mass DOT. When we close a road, that's a little different story. We have the authority to temporarily close a road, and that we can enforce. Typically we let residents in. We can close a road with common sense. We can let residents in, and deliveries or whatever, but we can keep out buses and through traffic. In terms of restricting heavy commercial vehicles, you have to do an engineering study, and you have to petition Mass DOT, and they have to approve each street by street. And they specifically would never do 1A. They won't do a numbered route. They won't restrict that. And you have to, there's a bunch of criteria you have to satisfy. I agree with you on the bus route through. In fact, I would like to explore more ideas that, to direct people. Hopefully they would read that, their own good, go to a drop zone, then go to a parking zone. Franklin Street, the only thing with Franklin Street is trying to get out of Franklin Street. Trying to get out of that neighborhood would be tough. But yeah, generally I like the bus route idea.
That sounds like a,
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
that's fine. That sounds like a homework assignment for the Transportation Commission. Did you have another thing about this amendment?
Are we still on the southern, the Washington Square South Amendment?
Kind of want to get that.
All right, you do that. I got more to say.
I know you do.
Let me just say, I do acknowledge that there was a brochure at one time that outlined drop zones and parking zones specifically. It's ghastly out of date. And I think that it could be more creatively designed to direct on specific streets, and needs to be better communicated. Thank you. Back to you in the amendment.
Thank you. Just thinking.
Sorry, Councilor, if I could.
Yeah.
This is Washington Square West.
The amendment is for Washington Square West to make a 10-minute limit, 20 feet south of Brown Street to 20 feet north of Essex Street.
So I guess it's
From the intersection.
would that be October only? Yes. Okay.
And then just to add, you'd also want to repeal or add back in section 1, that paragraph 2, which we repealed earlier. I think I'm thinking about that correctly, right?
Well, that was part of my question was the rest of the year, do we want to maintain that 1 hour parking there, the non-Halloween times, and then overlay it for October or for, and in fact, I should hesitate to just use October because it's mid-September problem, but so just wanted to bring that up because if we repeal the 1 hour parking, then we won't have it in May.
I guess, so my intention is not to change it for the entire year. I think that probably deserves a bigger conversation. And it would feel a little haphazard to do it that way. But it would be, my intention would be to have it in October for that entire stretch, actually that entire corner going to to Washington Square South, to have that all be temporary. So I don't know the way we need to word that. That's the way that I would.
So
I don't know if we would need to, I guess we could delete that section 2 there, that's in section 1, that second paragraph, and then just amend below in section 3. I think we'd probably be okay there. But I guess we would understand the will of the committee coming out to the council, and we could do some homework between now and then to make sure that we've got this worded correctly.
So if I could, we are going to keep this, the second paragraph in section 1 will still be omitted, deleting that. And then for section 3 under Washington Square West, we're changing it to from a 1 hour to a 10-minute limit. And then it will be from 20 feet south of Brown Street to 20 feet north of Essex. And then we would be changing Washington Square South to 10 minutes. It's all the same amendment. Okay. So I'm going to ask the committee, everyone sitting in council chairs, if you want to briefly take public testimony on this, or you want to vote on this amendment? Okay, so if the three of you don't mind just popping up, and we'll just ask anyone who wants to do public testimony about what we've discussed so far, and then we'll come back and deal with the amendment and then the full. They're not? Oh, okay. So no one in the chamber, and now Mr. Fisk has left us as well. So it's back to us. You guys want to come back? All right. So now it's to the City Council. We have this amendment, okay, which is, I'm not going to repeat it because I know everyone knows exactly what I said word for word. Any more discussion on it? Yeah, Councilor Joseph.
Washington Square South, is that year round or is it only,
Just dealing with-
doesn't say if it's just October only or year round?
I think be consistent needs to say,
It's 10 minutes, but doesn't say if it's a permanent year round or October only.
Yes. Ask that question of Lieutenant Tucker and Christina, maybe.
Yep.
Is why it was written that way without October.
is the intent October or not?
No, on Washington Square South was year-round, much like it is now. We're going to leave it year-round. We're just going to switch it to the other side.
So that would just flipping from one side of that street to the other.
In terms of bus parking. And then there was a tack-on amendment, a tack-on ordinance recommendation to have no parking in the former bus spots just for the month of October. It's a little confusing, you know. So year-round buses will flip to the other side. And then for October, there'll be no parking along the common in that area.
Councilor Joseph.
Is that along the parking lot, not blocking the windows of the?
Yes, correct, right.
Is the city councilor good with that?
Okay. Councilor Watson.
Yeah, but it doesn't solve the question on the table, which is the 10-minute amendment idea. So the idea really could be you could amend the Washington Square South to match the Washington Square West details. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to repeat this real quick. We are, Councilor Gerslo's amendment is Washington Square West, 20 feet south of Brown Street to 20 feet north of Essex Street, to a 10-minute limit. And Washington Square South which is year-round, to a 10-minute limit as well. Lieutenant.
So, right, so that as proposed doesn't answer the question of the current spaces on Washington Square West the rest of the year. So that would essentially make them disappear. Well, it's not necessarily disappear, but I don't know if we can overlay the 1 hour parking. We might be able to do that. I don't know if we can overlay that with a superseding ordinance for the month of October.
So I guess the intent of the committee, from what I can understand, is to take Washington Square West and Washington Square South and to make those 10 minutes in the month of October. And that's as I understand it, that's the only thing we're attempting to do right here. So I think we can vote on the amendment, and then over the next, until I guess next week and a half, we can just fine tune it, bring it back before the full council, and Councilor Cohen can let us know what it looks like on the floor. But I think the vote would give us an understanding of what the intent of the committee was at the very least.
Councilor Watts.
Thank you. Lieutenant Tucker, do you mind clarifying your comment a minute ago, just to be clear that I super understand what's happening here? So in addition to the amendment changing the duration of time in October only on Washington Square West, you are also taking additional space. Is that right? Is the space the same year round? Is that what you're saying? Is that there's additional spaces taken for October which are not being taken year round?
Correct.
Correct. Okay. So the amendment 20 feet from Brown to 20 feet from Essex is the extended amount of space taken, which is the loss of parking, right? On that's where Hawthorne Boulevard, sort of right before the intersection. And so you're looking for clarification as to those adopted parking spaces year round?
Not so much the metered spaces,
Okay.
but the current bus zone that's there.
What is the current bus zone the other 11 months out of the year? And it is not currently now, because we repealed that second section, second paragraph in section 1, there is now no.
Actually, no, to strike that was to strike the repeal of those spaces.
Right.
So those spaces would remain 1 hour parking.
So this solves for that, does it not? Retaining the second paragraph of section 1 solves for your question around the 11 months of the year, 1 hour or restriction?
Yes.
Okay.
By eliminating that language there, that retains the parking, but then we'll essentially be overlaying that area with a 10-minute drop zone, which might be proper. I don't know that part of it.
Yeah, we can check with legal, but I mean, you're also overlaying by taking more additional metered spaces in October. So if that's legal, then so is limiting time, place, and manner, babe, right? Then so is limiting the time box. Jeff?
So in the original version that we had, there was actually going to be a few parking spaces left very close to the corner of Essex Street. And so the 20 feet from Brown, the 20 feet from Essex, I think is a wider swath than was originally discussed.
And actually takes additional metered
That were not
spaces.
originally intended by the commission.
Okay.
I think we should just try and figure out the actual distances here. I know
Yeah.
in kind of a strange way, because the original intention of the commission, if I can speak to that, was that there would still be, I believe, at least 3 parking spaces.
Metered parking spaces towards the corner of Essex.
Exactly.
Got
Yeah,
you.
so I think the 20 feet to Essex, 20 feet to Brown is actually a wider
An
swath.
extension.
Yeah, which we wanted to leave some paid parking there.
Got you. Yeah, so this amendment, as I think the committee established with the 20 feet to 20 feet, actually doesn't do what we want it to do. I think that the measurements need to stay the same, but the duration is the only thing that needs to change. So if I clear this up in my brain, right, we're retaining paragraph 2 of section 1, which solves for the 11th month out of the year restriction to a 1 hour limit. down on section 3, Washington Square West, that's paragraph 4. What we're really saying, we're leaving the distance as is, as defined, which is already an extension of that space, but not as far as 20 to 20. And changing 1 hour limit to 10-minute drop zone or 10-minute temporary, however the committee would like to word that legally. But then the rest remains, right? It's much simpler than I think we thought.
Yeah, the distance is, I think, keeping the original language in the distance is how we'll stay with the correct length of spaces.
Councilor Hepworth, does that, it's through obviously the chair.
Step up. The loss of 15 feet is not Washington Square West, it's Washington Square South. It's, section 1, Washington Square South is 120 feet. Washington Square South that we're adding is 135 feet. That's the 15 feet. That is the 15 feet. So I'm just comparing apples to apples. Washington Square South, which is section 1, says extending 120 feet. In the addition, Washington Square South extending 135. The Washington Square West, we haven't calculated if we changed it to Brown and Essex exactly what the difference is, because right now all we're doing there for October is going from 165 feet to whatever 20 feet from Brown Street to 20 feet from Essex Street. We haven't calculated that, and either as the transportation department.
Which I think is why we should keep the original language for Washington Square West, because without having to do a remeasure or rewording of it, we know that the distance is the same for Washington Square West. If we change it to 20 from Brown, 20 from Essex, we're actually creating a wider swath of exclusively bus parking, and we're losing the metered space that exists there.
I know you're saying that, but what is the actual fee?
Without having to remeasure the whole thing, I think keeping the existing ordinance language is probably the most efficient at this time.
That's again, it says 165 feet to whatever 20 feet south of Brown to 20 feet north of Essex is. I don't know if that's 165 feet or 180 feet or whatever.
The original ordinance was, well, the original ordinance added just 70 feet of space on Washington Square West, in addition to the spaces that were already in existence. So I thought Councilor Hapworth had suggested the whole thing. Was that your intent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess I think if I can summarize the issue here, we measured the corner of Essex by walking in one direction and marking it, and then walking back from that direction forward. What seems like a really crazy way to measure something.
As I mentioned, it wasn't the ideal.
So that's the issue we're running up against. I think that at least my hope was that we just took what we had written here and then we added the stretch that goes all the way to Brown Street to it. And I think that what we're running into is we don't know what we're going to, but I think it's three parking spaces, right? Something like that. So I personally have no intention to go all the way any further than we need to. It was just to take what we currently have here, what the commission wanted, and then to add the section that goes all the way to Brown Street to it. I don't know what that measurement is, unfortunately, because of the way we measured.
I could measure it now, but I could go out and wheel it, but if it's, that'd be 95 feet from Essex. Then starting at a point 95 feet north of Essex, running for, I'd have to see what the other spaces are, but 70 feet at least, and then making the other spaces.
Chair, how many buses were you planning on trying to put there? 3, or was it 3?
Thank you, Chair. I guess the length or the measurements could stay the same, being irrelevant now that we're changing it to a 10-minute drop spot, not necessarily a parking spot. Does that make sense? I mean, so I don't see why we're spending all this time on worried about the measurements when we just took it from a 1-hour parking spot to just a drop zone. It's a drop zone. So we don't need the additional length for anything. It's, you got 10 minutes to drop them and go. That's what what Councilor Drislow was talking about was both sides, basically all of Washington Square just being a drop zone. There is no park.
We're going to try something. We're going, I mean, in some ways, the most important thing we're doing is changing the hour to 10 minutes to make it more of a drop-off, okay? The question is, and I don't have any more room on my paper for another different change here, is do we keep the same, as Jeff said, do we keep the same distance? Because to Councilor Harvey's point, it's become a drop. I'm kind of deferring to
Can Councilor Harvey, can you clarify what you mean by that? I'm not understanding how that would make a.
Well, the original wording was a 2-hour limit or a 1-hour parking limit. We're now taking that 1-hour parking away and turning it into a 10-minute limit drop zone. So what does it matter if we extend the length of that drop zone in comparison to what they've already come up with? I guess that's my point. It's only a drop zone. It's a drop zone. Nothing's going to be sitting there for any length of time.
So,
maybe, unless I'm missing something. You know what I'm saying? I just don't understand why we're spending so much time on talking about the actual length of the parking if it's going to become just a 10-minute drop zone.
Just a point of clarification.
I think we might be on the same track. The spaces that are currently like striped for the 2 spaces, it would be a little bit of a waste of space if someone were to pull halfway into like 2 spaces. So they could park straddling a line of 2 spaces, and then that makes it so another bus coming along is now unable to use what should be 2 spaces of bus parking for temporary drop off, and then has to continue on.
But aren't they supposed to park in the line whether it's temporary or not?
It should be marked.
Okay, so.
And these spaces will be metered when they're outside of October.
Councilor Watson, Phil.
Thank you, Councilor Cohen. I think that folks are confused about what is the current state versus the future state in October. So when you read through the retained language now, which is Washington Square West bus stops westerly side beginning 20 feet from the intersection of Brown for a distance of 100 feet in a southerly direction, 1-hour limit, tour bus parking only. That is currently those 2 spaces that currently exist. Okay, so we're going to keep those. Now, when you jump down to the 4th paragraph in section 3, Washington Square West bus stops westerly side beginning 165 feet north. So you go up from the corner of Essex to the beginning of the 165 feet and then come back down 70. That 70 is not a 1-for-1, what I previously read. It's an extension by approximately 3 parking spots that are currently metered. So what this ordinance describes is in October only, currently as written for 1-hour limit, though the motion is to change to 10-minute drop zone, includes an extension of that physical space, which is currently 2 spots, to an additional 3rd spot by measuring 70 feet from the beginning of that 20 feet from the curb of Brown, now down into the first 2 parking meter spaces. So it's important to note that there's 2 primary changes to the Washington Square West paragraph under section 3. That is both originally the extension of the physical space in October only, and now the committee is hopefully going to motion also a change of limiting that time from 1 hour to 10 minutes. So The proposal, as Councilor Harvey and I think have both communicated, is with the year-round retention of Washington Square West, right, which is the second paragraph of section 1. We're covered 11 months out of the year, current state physical space, 1 hour limit, 9 to 6 year-round. In October only, we are now additionally taking 2 metered parking spaces along that stretch of the street, and if the committee wills, limiting to 10-minute drop zone in October only. Does that help clarify for everyone what's going on here? Because it's super confusing. So when Councilor Hapworth noted that we should retain the same distance, but make it corner to corner, basically 20 to 20, he actually adopted accidentally however many additional metered parking spaces, which was not the Transportation Commission's intention. So if we retain Exactly. So if we retain the language around distance as outlined in the proposed ordinance, and we only change the time limit to 10 minutes, I think we solve our problem. I think we get to the original intent of the conversation. It's actually much simpler as long as we retain that second paragraph.
All right.
I'll take a round of applause.
Can I make, can I make it worse for one moment? So we talk 20 feet from Brown, 20 feet from Essex. The current bus parking is not 20 feet from Brown, it's like 45 feet from Brown. And move down, ease that turn, which I think we should keep. I don't think we want to go any closer. What I would propose is, for measurement purposes, instead of going 165 and back down 70, we're just starting at 95 and going north of 70 feet. And that gets you to the current bus spaces. That's the 3 metered parking spaces.
So
95.
So instead of 165, it's 95?
Starting at a point 95 feet north of Essex.
Yeah.
And running north for 70 feet, the new ordinance.
No. Yeah, but which numbers are we changing? So we have 165 and 70 in the paragraph. We're keeping the 70 and we're changing the 165 to 95?
Right, and change the direction. You're going to run northerly on, instead of southerly for 70 feet, you're going to run.
So north, we're changing both directions, right?
No, we're only changing the southerly direction. You're still walking north from Essex, 95 instead of 165. And then you're going to continue to walk 70, which
Okay.
brings you to the starting
We're
line.
changing the 165, 95, we're changing after 70 feet in a
Northerly
southerly
direction.
Northerly direction,
Correct.
and that's it.
Yes.
Talking about this in a minute.
Oh, and the 10 minute. Did you get the 10?
We'll get to 10
Okay.
minutes. Okay, so let me repeat this amendment. Councilor Jerzo moved. Are you cool with that? Okay. That we change, that we're keeping section 1, paragraph 2. Right? No. We're keeping that paragraph. Yeah, we're not repealing that, right?
By not repealing it requires you to accept the repealing of the repealing. So yes, that was the motion that's already been made.
No, our original motion was to repeal that.
But it's in a section of repealed language.
It's a strike.
We're not striking it anymore.
No, you are striking it, Chair.
Getting rid of that?
Yeah. No. So
No.
If we don't strike it, we'll be repealing those bus routes. 1 hour. The rest of the year, for all year.
So we're not going to strike paragraph 2 of section 1.
We do want to strike.
you do. You have to because it covers the 11 months out of the year.
Okay, so we already did that.
Yep.
Striking that. And then Councilor Jerzo's amendment is that for section 3, paragraph 4, Washington Street West, we're changing the 165 to 95. We're changing the distance of 70 feet in a southerly to northerly direction. We're changing it to 10 minutes. And we're also changing the Washington Square South from 2 hours to 10 minutes.
Yes, and just a note that that second one on Washington Square South changing is a year-round change to 10 minutes. So if the commission wanted to make a similar proposal where it is 11 months out of the year, 1 hour, just like on Washington Square West, and then for 1 month it is 10 minutes only. Yeah,
We're just
but for tonight,
just voting on the amendment, okay? So that was seconded by Councilor Harvey. Is ready to vote? All in favor? Hey, that passes. Oh, I'm sorry. Just want to see if Mr. Fisk has any comments. Anyone in Zoom land have any comments? If you do, raise your hand. You're just here to watch. So if we might have a quorum of the Transportation Commission, so someone might have to leave. Okay. Anything else on this ordinance? Councilor Hepburn.
Sorry, I know we have talked this thing to death. Based on a comment probably made an hour and a half ago by Councilor Watson-Felt about Bridge Street, I do have, I guess, looking at it, I do have concerns about that being a drop-off zone there. It is a tough spot to come out of just generally with cars kind of coming kind of fast up Bridge Street. I think there are pedestrians crossing there. I would have concerns about that. And I would just ask if we've considered the Salem jail lot itself, which I think is probably like 15 spaces. Have we considered that as a tour bus drop-off point? To Councilor Harvey's point, which I think is a good point, that the majority of people coming in on tour buses could walk a distance of a block to get to where they need to get. Have we considered taking that space there, which I think has a pretty easy, could have an easy in and out for tour buses, potentially, I guess I'd have to look at it, as a space where tour buses could drop. I mean, the people who park there in October, you're a lucky person if you even know that exists, and that if you find a spot down there, it's not vital parking. There's not even businesses there anymore. There was a restaurant there for a long time, that I think is why that lot was created. So if we consider just taking that and having that be a temporary tour bus drop zone.
I know a lot of residents that don't have parking in that building actually park there. So I would say no, and I don't think that's big enough parking lot.
Is it resident parking there, or is it metered parking? Sorry, Councilor.
But they actually park there. I know people that live there that actually use that parking lot, but I don't know if that's big enough for a tour bus to turn around.
I can barely turn my car around.
I would agree with Councilor Gerslow on that.
It was a bad idea. All right.
Is that's too tight, isn't it?
Currently, that's too tight to come in and out the same driveway. We did think about that, like it would be a longer term project. Could we modify that so the bus could come in and then exit? Something we could continue to look at, but that would be construction.
Councilor Watson-Felt.
Thank you, Councilor Cohen. Yeah, as the ward two counselor, I have to echo Councilor Derslow's comments just about residents and their guests using that parking lot, and its difficulty with moving in and out. I would posit, Christina, would it, because I think that there's a lot of problems with the way people drive up and down that street. I think they take the turn really fast, they move really fast, they run the light all the time. Washington, winter has always been a problem. We know that. We've talked a lot about that. If narrowing the road with a tour bus stop and making it permanent and maybe doing a bump out at the end of Howard, right, that you would then safely pull forward enough to be protected and see, you'd move the cross, right? You could make that a permanent bus stop, which I don't hate, even though I'm currently concerned, right, because of the way that it's temporary, it's not year-round, the whole thing. If you were to entertain, or I would encourage, please think through or maybe look into like what actually you could do there, if, with MassDOT's support, obviously, to make it easier to take that left coming off of Howard onto onto Bridge safely to give better visual, a sort of an aesthetic barrier that narrows that area that hopefully would also further then protect pedestrians crossing. I just think that there's an opportunity there. It does keep that bus outside the downtown a little bit more. Just thinking through it, if it were permanent, maybe it also has a traffic calming component to it that might be worth exploring.
All right. Councilor Hep.
Can I just understand the reason for the change on Bridge Street or the addition of Bridge Street? Is it just trying to get an extra space for people to drop? Is that what that is?
Right. It was identified as a wide spot. There's a place they could get off and gather. That's city property. And then when we mentioned before, like once they've dropped, where will they go? They could go to Ford Avenue and then seemingly come back to that spot somewhere in that area to get their group back. And I did look at the sight lines. I think if the bus pulls in, you have about 105 feet from the exit of the parking lot to the crosswalk by Howard. So if a bus pulls in, basically just beyond the driveway to the parking lot, coming out of Howard, because you're at the outside of the curve, you should have a pretty good sight line of vehicles coming past the bus. And in fact, I don't know if you're generally presented with 2 lanes coming at you there, but that would reduce it to force it to be 1 lane. Because I know the entrance point, sometimes people in 2 lanes. Not sure at what point they merge.
One other additional point too is that when there are instances of complete closure in downtown, there needs to be a few bus parking unloading spaces that are beyond the most extreme, widest road closures. And this is one that would functionally never get shut down. And I believe that was also the intention of Lieutenant Tucker for suggesting the New Derby Street location as well. Those are in locations that almost never get shut down.
Yeah, I completely understand that. I think that just speaking as a resident there, it feels dangerous as it is coming out of that spot there. And I would, like, the amount of times I've had my kids in the back seat and they look left, look right, look left, look right, and cars are speeding down to get to the light and cars are coming around the corner there. I understand that happens in a lot of places, but that's uniquely, I think, and there's a lot of people who use Howard as a cut through to get out of downtown Salem. It's not just residents. I would look for a different spot there. I would feel it very unsafe adding that as a tour bus drop zone. I think it adds a little confusion to that spot there, potentially unexpected confusion for drivers who are used to going down that street.
I'm just going to say I don't live there, but I frequent that area quite a bit. I actually think Council Watson-Felt's idea that this could actually create some kind of narrowing of the street, traffic calming. We have the bypass, so, less people use regular Bridge Street, and we still have that crazy intersection of Winter and Bridge that's, a lot of work has been done, but it's not geometric, and there's still people passing on the right side and all that stuff. So are you asking for us to delete this or for the Traffic Commission, the Transportation Commission to put it on their homework list?
So I would rather see a different spot for that. And I don't know where that would be, but I wouldn't personally vote if I were on the committee. I wouldn't vote for this to be in this spot right here.
You gonna make a motion? Yeah, go for it, Councilor Jersey.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to agree with Councilor Hepworth. I think it's a dangerous spot. I get your idea how it's on a roadway that doesn't get closed, but I travel that roadway a lot too. And coming around the corner, people, they take that right on Red to get onto the Bridge Street and they fly. And I know I've seen a lot of people trying to cross from Howard Street on Bridge Street over to the other side, and it's pretty dangerous. I don't know if you're going to do that, maybe put one of those walking lights there or something like that and beef up the crosswalk. Yeah, I think it's, maybe if it was more towards the cemetery, like make the crosswalk narrower or something, if it's that big, to get more to the right side. But I don't know if the bus is facing Bridge Street and you're going to park at Fort Ave, how would you come back to park there? You'd have to go all the way through town and get all the way out there again. If the roads are closed, so you're not going to be able to get to that spot again. So, this is a tough thing because I don't want all the buses down on Fort Ave either. So I don't know where you're going to put them. There's other, I don't know any other parking lots in the city, if the city's looked into any other areas to rent or put the buses. This is a tough, and I applaud that, all the work that you put into it, and I appreciate it. Thank you. It's my thoughts. Thank you.
Just to speak very quickly about circulation, from Webb Street, they could take the right on the bridge and loop around the bypass road. It's not the most intuitive, but it would be possible, and it's all permitted routes.
Councilor Watson-Phil.
Thank you. I share the concerns as I've noted before, but I do think that if there were some really highly visual, highly impactful changes there, I think there's potential for that to work safely. If it were a more permanent installation and it were, there were other augmentations that increased safety for folks who needed to navigate around that corner, because I agree with Councilor Hapworth, but I think there's potential. I will say having a solution there because of the bypass is actually also really helpful because we see a lot of illegal drop-off and pickup in that area, specifically around the Morenci Manor Salem Housing Authority property, which has happened multiple times. I even saw it a couple weeks ago at 11 o'clock at night. There was a huge group standing on a little grassy knoll outside the public housing there, waiting for their bus to pick up. And that's a terrible location because it's a traffic lane. It's a moving traffic lane. So it's not uncommon. There's clearly a pressure for that space. And I know my colleague, Councilor Hapworth, and I agree on this point that we don't want to, consistently reward bad behavior by making allowances to making it work, legally. But at the same time, I do think because of the street closures, because of 1A, because of the bypass road, you do see a lot of pressure there. So a solution in that area does make sense. I am concerned about it being an October-only temporary confusion point, especially if it's just like pull over and drop. I do have very real concerns about that. So I'd be happy to support it if there was an additional level of investment in that location, and perhaps even an extension to making it a year-round spot, really using it to our advantage permanently. Otherwise, I share the same concerns as Councilor Hapworth.
Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Chair. It might not be feasible or allowed, but are we allowed to could we use the actual T station as a drop zone where they have the elevator and and easy in and out access?
No, we've looked at that. They're very protective of that. That's T buses and vehicles only.
Thank you.
Councilor.
I guess I'll just add the Universal Steel lot. Has that been proposed as a spot that could be the drop zone? I don't think that street is closed down very often. It's city-owned property.
Not to my knowledge. I think we would have to probably eliminate parking in there or really reduce it to bring a bus in and out.
And that would eliminate the fundraising that occurs on October weekends there for the Salem Youth Organization. So just further impacts to consider.
Wouldn't eliminate the entire parking lot. Just if we could have if we're looking for a space for a single bus to park for 10 minutes, could we potentially find some space in that lot?
I think we could take a look, but I'm not sure they could even pull in the way it's currently configured, and then it's not a wide open lot. There's center island, so you'd just to make sure they can make the turns, come back out. I don't know. I don't think so, but we could look at that.
All right, so you guys have some homework. Just a reminder that we have another order of business after this.
I'll be very brief.
Is this about the ordinance as it's written?
About Bridge Street, just in additional consideration, I would love to explore like making Bridge Street year-round. To Councilor Watson-Feld's point, I believe that's actually a wise decision to make it year-round. There's also, if you notice if you're looking at the map, it's actually currently 2 lanes inbound on Bridge Street from bridge to bridge. It's 2 lanes there, which is redundant in my mind. And I think a lot of the confusion could be eliminated by making that a single lane and then narrowing it naturally with the bus parking. I'd love to explore that with the commission.
All right, we look forward to your report. So there's enforcement, there's safety, there's this. So anything else about this page document? Councilor Hap.
I would just ask a member of the committee to consider removing the section about Bridge Street.
Are there any motions about Bridge? Councilor Jisson.
Take it off. And explore it more.
Well, we can't move that. We can either keep it or take it off, change it, but we can't make a motion to explore something. You know,
No, take it off
tech
and
event.
then explore it. Back to it.
So Councilor Jurzo moves that we remove section 3, paragraph about Bridge Street. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hart. Any discussion? No? Okay. The motion by Councilor Jurzo, second by Councilor Harvey, is that section 3, we remove the paragraph Bridge Street bus stop. All in favor? See 2 hands, so matter carried. Anything else about this piece of paper?
Just want to thank the 3 of you and the 2 of you over there for being patient with us here, and thank Councilor Cohen for his work chairing this here.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We're looking forward to your homework assignment being complete. I just want to repeat for the committee, what we've done is section 1, paragraph 2, we are repealing the repeal, right? We're accepting the repeal. We're keeping the repeal, right? Yeah, keeping repeal. Okay. Section 3, Bridge Street, we're removing. Section 3, Washington Square West, we're changing the 165 to 95. We're changing the 1-hour limit to 10 minutes. Oh, and we're changing the distance 70 feet from southerly to northerly. And then we're changing the Washington Square South to it's year round, but we're changing it from a 2-hour limit to a 10-minute limit. Everyone cool with all that? All right, you guys are great. Thank you so much. Keep up the good work. Stay safe. Okay. Now, this one is, believe it or not, if you guys want to stay, this one's going to take 35 seconds. Okay. Just want to remind the committee that we did meet before. We were going to positively recommend basically doubling the fines for failure to remove snow and ice from the sidewalk. And in the original meeting, so everyone knows, we had Building Commissioner Afanos, who said that they actually have a new plan this year, which is to take the bad actors and be proactive with them. So the uh, Bridge Street near Boston Street, storage facility, West Ave. There's a couple of places on Highland Ave. They will be proactive. They will go out. The thing that a lot of people didn't understand is that these offenses, as the building commissioner enforces them, are per day. There's a consensus that people are not removing stuff because it costs more money than the fine that they were paying. The other thing is Councilor Harvey had submitted some questions for DPS Director Joden. And the intent, the claim that the director made is that their focus is at schools, busy intersections, and parks, and to make sure that they get through all public spots. There's been some chatter in the universe that the city doesn't clear sidewalks, but that is a priority. And then the reason we had to come back to this committee for new recommendation is, excuse me, unfortunately, there was a difference between the backup documents and the agenda in the last meeting. So everyone can see that what's in front of you is the new change. And there's one really important thing for people, for the 0 people who are listening in the audience and everyone here who wasn't at the meeting, is that for us to be able to do this increase, the solicitor used a law called 40U and Chapter 40U. And that was actually the only way to get this done in this manner. Unfortunately, it doesn't enable the city to differentiate between residential and commercial. So that's why there's no difference on the fines and the enforcement between residential and commercial. The other thing that the building commissioner said, they were going to be sensitive to people who have, struggle doing their own sidewalks. For whatever reason, they might have mobility challenges or whatever. And I did talk to the mayor, and I think there was a period of time where, like, there was a program with high school kids. We might reach out to ROTC or some other places, but it would be really great. It's not obviously part of the ordinance, but it would really be great for us to have a vehicle where people can call in who really can't clear their sidewalks in a timely manner, and people would volunteer and go out and do it. So does anyone have any questions about, yes, Councilor Harvey?
Thank you, Chair. I apologize. I wasn't at that first meeting. I was away. But the only question I have is there a time frame from when the fines would start in relation to when the snow stopped, or is it same time frame as if there's a snow emergency and they lift the ban? Is that how it's written? Yep. Just curious.
Yes, sir. Sorry. Yes, sir. It's I believe it's 24 hours after the storm stops. Yep. Yep. Any? Oh, come on. We ran out of stuff. Yeah, you. Okay. So if no one has, oh, you know what? We're going to go back to the first ordinance. Because someone has to make a motion to refer this. It's amended. Yeah, Councilor Jerzo, motion.
Make a motion, we send it to the council with a positive recommendation.
As amended.
As amended.
Second by Councilor Harvey. All in favor? Because we're not taking any more dialogue on that one. Okay, the second one, same thing. I'm going to put this in Councilor Harvey's scene.
I make a motion that we send this back to the council for recommendation. Positive recommendation, I'm sorry.
Second.
Councilor Jerslow. Any discussion? No discussion allowed. Oh, you got a, same thing.
Why not put this on the record, if I may? So to Councilor Harvey's question before around the timing of snow removal, the current ordinance as already exists is written that sidewalk, I'm paraphrasing, such sidewalk and curb ramp cut to be removed there from within 6 hours after the snow ceasing to fall or the city's snow emergency lights are turned off, whichever time is later. And then it says it needs to be, if it snows overnight, the snow shall be removed before 12 noon. So it's 6 hours after the end of the snow or by 12 noon if it's an overnight snow.
And I do know that the city has intentionally left the blue lights on a little bit longer to accommodate people, especially with the storms we had last year that were icy. Yeah, okay. All in favor? One more. Who wants to do a motion? Councilor Harvey.
Motion to adjourn.
Councilor Harvey motions to adjourn. All in favor?